If there's no diagnosis, then there's no illness. Besides, doctors make you sick. Or worse. The ME removed his examination gloves and tossed them in the trash. He looked at the detective and shook his head. COD was a ruptured brain aneurysm. Odd, the detective said. Nothing in his medical record showed he had an aneurysm. Are you sure? The brain is right there. The ME gestured to a metal bowl on the counter. Diagnosed or not, that was the cause of death. Doctors make you sick. There's an old belief that claims that doctors made you sick. It's still a widespread belief, but for a very different reason. These days it has more to do with doctor or hospital visits than the old reasoning. There was a time when people believed that if you weren't diagnosed with an illness, then you wouldn't have gotten it. The doctor gave her cancer, and other statements of the same ilk were popular expressions of frustration. As understandable as it is to look for someone to blame, the statements are factually untrue. Such beliefs coincide with the idea that if you weren't diagnosed with something, then you can't have it. In the example above, the deceased was never diagnosed with having an aneurysm. Maybe the doctors missed it, or maybe he never had the necessary examinations. Regardless of the reason for not being diagnosed, the aneurysm was still there. Most people today would agree that doctors are calling out what is already in the system. Cancer, tumors, abscess, heart conditions, and many other things. They're not putting them there, and not diagnosing it doesn't mean it's not there. Mental conditions are no different. If I mention that I have ADHD, people will want to know when I was diagnosed. I can tell you that in October of 2021, I was diagnosed with PNES, but I haven't been officially diagnosed with ADHD. Does that mean I don't have ADHD or any other neurodivergent conditions? As I continue my studies of ADHD and related conditions, I'm finding things that I associate with and things I don't. I can view things from my perspective, share it with people who know me, and confirm that there is a strong possibility that I do have ADHD. Possibly a few other things. It could be very well that the person in the snippet above didn't have an exam because he couldn't afford it or was afraid to find out. The same can be said for those who suspect that they may have a mental condition. If they don't get diagnosed, then they'll be all right. Isn't that how it works? Don't fear the diagnosis. If you have severe chest pain, odds are you'd want to check it out. Men tend to put the exam off for as long as possible because it's nothing. I did the same thing for several months until I had no choice. Turned out it was something. I had a heart attack, and the pains leading up to it were indications that one was coming. I didn't have anything to be afraid of by going to the doctors, but I knew that if it was something serious, then the expenses would be out of control. Still, when I had no choice, I finally received the treatment I needed. I'm doing much better because of it. The same is true for people with mental conditions. I don't like to say mental illness because that implies that there's something wrong. If it's a sudden case, then yes, there is something wrong. Being neurodivergent isn't an illness or a disease. It's not something to fear, and neither is being diagnosed. When a person is diagnosed with something, mental or physical, then they can begin to receive treatment for that condition. The physical can be fixed, hopefully. The mental issues can be treated to allow them to function in ways that makes their lives easier for them. Deny the stigma. There is the idea that if someone is neurodivergent, then there's something wrong with them. That idea stems from the same belief about people being different. Different is bad and needs to be fixed. It's a deplorable way to think. What's worse is the belief that different is contagious. I don't know of anyone who is infected with a broken leg by someone who had a broken leg. It's a ridiculous thought. Somehow, Being infected by someone with ADHD or autism is considered a rational thought. Though they won't admit it, people who shun neurodivergent people have that idea burrowed into their minds. Neurodivergent people aren't infectious. I'll say it again for the people in the back of the class. Neurodivergent people aren't infectious. While they may have infectious personalities, you won't become neurodivergent by hanging out with us. You might learn a thing or two if you're willing. It exists, diagnosed or not. Doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, and counselors don't create neurodivergent people. They simply verify what's already there. Most mental conditions, such as ADHD and autism, exist from birth. Undiagnosed chronic mental conditions can worsen over time and lead to other conditions, such as PNES. A diagnosis doesn't create the condition. It simply brings it to light so that it can be dealt with in a positive and productive manner. Someone who, like me, is undiagnosed with ADHD can still recognize the symptoms and take suggestions from others who have been diagnosed. We can learn and share experiences on how to deal with the complications we have. The reason I haven't been diagnosed is a financial matter. At $200 to $500 a sessions and no insurance, it's not likely to happen anytime soon. I wouldn't have even considered it if I had not been given a preliminary test. Even when my son was diagnosed, I never thought about having myself tested when I was in a position to do so. I have learned, and continue to learn, so much about neurodiversity. One of the things I learned is that it is hereditary. Had I known that several years ago, my life might have taken a different path. But that's in the past. Diagnosed or not, I still have to live with it. From what I've heard from those who are being treated, it's better to know for sure than not. At least then, proper treatment can be had. The guessing and testing of treatments go a lot differently when you're able to work with someone who knows how to help. It's your turn. If you or someone you know has been diagnosed with ADHD, I'd love to hear your story. If you've written an article on it, please leave a link in the comment section. If you haven't been diagnosed, but suspect that you might be neurodivergent, please leave your comments as well and share this with someone you know. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so that you can get more neurodivergent stories to expand your mind, alter your mindset, and improve your mental health.